A shakeup on the San Francisco 49ers defensive line. Former Raider Clelin Ferrell in. Isaiah Oliver, former Falcon, cornerback in. Niners will lose, though, two big contributors on the defensive line from last year, Charles Omenihu and Samson Ebukam. More moves as well as we're in the new year. We're in the new league year here. Free agency frenzy on Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker on Twitter. Thank you, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. More moves for the 49ers, Croc. Let's start with the positive news. Let's start with who the 49ers have added to the equation here in free agency. And a couple of under-the-radar moves, Croc. And we don't have dollar numbers on these deals, but I have a feeling they're going to be a lot cheaper than the players that the 49ers lost at the same positions in Clelin Ferrell and Isaiah Oliver. And I like both additions here. And I like both players pre-draft. Both players somewhat stumbled in their first destination in the NFL, but I think there's still some potential there because they're veterans, but sort of younger veterans, just coming off their rookie contracts. And let's start with the former Raider, former Clemson Tiger, former national champion, Clelin Ferrell, who was just 2 picks after Nick Bosa, Croc, in 2019. He was the 4th pick in the NFL draft. He's a big dude. He looks the part. He's just not really a twitched up defensive end, and that's where he failed in the NFL. 10 sacks in 4 seasons for the Raiders. And look, the 49ers, Croc, have had a really good track record of taking those players. In fact, was Arden Key from the same draft? Arden Key, former Raider. I think Arden Key had even less production for the Raiders, like 3 sacks in 3 seasons or something. I think it was the year before, actually, in the draft. And got himself paid twice now since he came through and played for Chris Kuceric. So this is another reclamation project for Chris Kuceric, and I like it because it's a buy low. It's a 1-year contract. We'll see what the numbers are, but I have a feeling the dollars are low and much, much lower than what we saw with Samson Ebukam and Charles Omenihu that were lost via free agency that we'll talk about momentarily. But what are your thoughts first on Clelin Ferrell, new defensive end for the San Francisco 49ers?
For some of these guys, and people are asking, me about it on social media and stuff. And, we evaluated these guys coming out of college. And that's one evaluation. And the NFL, the way they do it is you got your college scouting department, and then you have your pro personnel scouting department, right? So now you're on the pro side of things. Whatever they were in college, and you can kind of maybe like a fit, maybe more so for your team, but there is film of them in the NFL, right? So what have they been since then? I say with Clelin Ferrell, even coming out, he was a guy who was more of a high motor guy than someone that was going to win consistently based off of his athleticism, technique, etc. Right? Like even like you look at Nick Bosa, not the most freakish athlete, but the most polished guy out there, and is extremely strong and very efficient from play in, play out. I didn't quite see that with Clelin Ferrell. And then you see him get to the NFL, same draft, they have Max Crosby, right? They got Max Crosby, I believe, in the 4th round, and he is, come on, he's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL.
The Raiders, they found a gem in Max Crosby, which I'm sure made them feel better about that draft, but they passed up on a bunch of other stud defensive linemen.
Brian Burns, Josh Allen.
Brian Burns, too, for Ferrell, who met the size standard. And, and like you mentioned, Croc, I think a lot of it, too, is he's a high character guy, high motor player, good locker room player. You could trust that he was going to be a pro, and he has been that. He just hasn't been a dynamic edge player.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a guy by the name of Solomon Thomas, right? Coming out of Stanford, high motor. Obviously, he had good sack production in that last year, but he was a guy who essentially kind of was this tweener and was going to win based on, oh man, he's a high motor, high character guy. John Lynch had a class with him at Stanford. Sometimes that doesn't work out, man. Take the freakish athlete and then just see how that kind of works for you. And with Clelin Ferrell, this will be good because one thing that he has working for him, going to the San Francisco 49ers, one, you got Nick Bosa on the field, so that's always going to help. Now you got, Hargrave, you got Eric Armstead. And you also have the guy that's kind of the puppet master of the whole thing who has really turned some teams around, or edge rushers or just, defensive linemen around in general with Chris Kasurek. So can Chris Kasurek work his magic once again and just really have a serviceable player? I don't think he has to come in and be a 7-sack type guy, but kind of like Arden Key, who really got going down the stretch, man. Can you come in? Can you be productive? Can you be versatile? Can you get 4 or 5 sacks and just get a sack here and there when the 49ers need it? And if they could just get that type of production out of him, I think they'd be very excited about the signing.
Yep, and Charles Omenihu too. I think he's a similar player, and he's going to have that same role. I think we know exactly how Clelin Ferrell is going to be used for the 49ers. He's going to be a rotational guy. Who knows? He might even roll out there and start because he could be a run defender as an edge player on early downs, and then he could rotate in the interior and be a pass rusher from the inside, just like we saw Arden Key, just like we saw from Charles Omenihu. And he could push the pocket a little bit. He's a powerful guy. He's a strong guy. He's got a high motor, so I think he really fits in from a character standpoint, fits in from a locker room standpoint. And look, if you are a defensive lineman trying to resurrect your career or just get it kick-started to begin with, playing for the San Francisco 49ers on a defensive line with Nick Bosa and defensive line coach Chris Kasurek, I think it's a smart move, and you can tell he's got some smarts as well, Clelin Ferrell, because that's a great opportunity for him and a great landing spot for Ferrell too.
No better landing spot, I feel like, in the NFL, especially, again, with the attention that Nick Bosa is going to draw. He's going to get doubled. He's going to be tripled sometimes. Sometimes I feel like there's 4 guys that touch him on the play, whether it's a tackle, a guard, then a running back, and then another guy trying to chip him with, a tight end, and that's consistent throughout games. So if he's getting that much attention, it should help you be a little bit more productive, get them to focus more on you. Now, it didn't work as well with Crosby, and I'm pretty sure Crosby got a lot of attention as well, but hopefully with Kasurek, he just put him in position. Look, you don't have to be the 4th overall pick with the 49ers. You just have to be good in this role. We just need you to do this. We don't need you to be the well-rounded guy and dynamic guy that you were drafted to be. Just be good at this specific thing, and if you could do that, you will drastically help this team.
Yeah, and they want him to be that edge player all the time, and I think moving around and playing some inside will really help him and probably help his pass rush production as well, rushing from the interior, where he might have an athletic advantage on some guards where he didn't outside on the edge.
Right.
Oh, but the Niners lost a couple players, Croc, and I think this is also with some budget moves here for the 49ers, an indication of what we talked about on yesterday's podcast is they don't have a lot of money left. People are talking about, they're going to bring in Darius Slay. No, they didn't bring in Darius Slay. They brought in Isaiah Oliver. They're not bringing in Zadarius Smith. They brought in Clelin Ferrell. So I think that's what we can expect here is really budget moves from here on out for the 49ers as it pertains to free agents in the offseason. And looking at the players they lost on the defensive line, man, Daniel Brunskill gone too. So we'll talk about Brunskill. We'll talk about the defensive backs here in a second. But I just want to finish the conversation about the 49ers defensive line. Charles Omenihu gets a 2-year, $20 million contract, $10 million per year with the Kansas City Chiefs, and Samson Ebukam a 3-year contract with the Indianapolis Colts at $8 million per year, 3 years, $24 million. So both of those, good on them for getting paid. But what we've seen from the 49ers, I think this is the smart way to do it. And they just, and to me, look, that those two guys combined, that's Hargrave's salary. So give me Hargrave all day rather than signing both Ebukam and Omenihu and bringing them back, and give me some budget moves, give me some draft picks to go with Javon Hargrave. So I'm all about it for the 49ers. I like the moves on the defensive line, even though I think they still need to hit the draft to finish this thing off. But you kind of see where their rotation is starting to look like in 2023. Yeah,
I'm really liking what they've done. And I've seen a lot of people kind of hit the panic button a little bit because you look at the departures and then guys that they brought in and is not quite evening out. But I think it is evening out the way that they want it to. In the sense of, again, just guys are to come in and do a very specific role. Look at the 49ers cornerbacks. Like, they need depth. They have a lot of young guys. Go out and get a guy like Isaiah Oliver. Before we got on here, you talked about him being a shadow draft pick for you.
That's right.
He was a guy for me who I believe I had him at CB3 behind Denzel Ward and Jair Alexander. So, I was pretty high on him as well with just kind of what his skill set is and how that could fit potentially in the 49ers defense. I thought he was a guy that fit very well. The NFL has changed a lot since then. The 49ers have changed a lot since then. They run a lot more too high, a lot more quarters. Can he play that? I've seen Atlanta kind of utilize him a little bit more in the slot as well as being able to go, on the outside. Obviously had an interception against the 49ers, but, I'm curious to see where exactly do they play him, because the 49ers do need help in the nickel as well. He'd be more of a bigger nickel though. He's not the Samuel Womack 5'9", 5'10" guy. He's a little bit more 6'1", probably close to 200 pounds. So do the 49ers go more the Carlos Rogers style nickel?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You know, it's funny that you brought that up about him having a pick against the 49ers. And, T.Y. McGill was really good against the 49ers in the preseason. All of a sudden, they snatch him off the Vikings practice squad. You see that a lot in the NFL where players that play really good against a team, those teams, they notice it. And they're like, well, this guy wrecked our game, so let's bring him onto our team. More on Isaiah Oliver. We got some questions from the listeners about the 49ers defensive backfield, how that's starting to shape up right now. Daniel Brunskill on the way out as well. So a lot more to cover here from free agency on this edition of Locked On 49ers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's now the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NBA season heating up. Teams fighting for playoff spots. Major League Baseball season getting ready to go. There's tons of draft props and NFL futures at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in America. Partners in the NFL, partners in the NBA, and now a partner with you because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You bet on everything you want. Talked about all the props. There's tons of parlays, which are super fun. I love the website. The layout could not be easier to navigate and make your bets. You've got money line bets, point scores, three-pointers drained in basketball games. Of course, the NCAA tournament is upon us as well. And FanDuel lets you combine those bets for a bigger chance at a payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Isaiah Oliver is an interesting one. And again, we know it's a 2-year deal. We still don't know what the dollar amount is, but I have a sneaking suspicion, Croc, that he's going to come in a little bit less than what Emmanuel Moseley got, or at least the first year will be less than what Emmanuel Moseley got because of the ACL. Interestingly enough, Isaiah Oliver came off his own ACL injury last year. So he's a 1 year ahead of where Emmanuel Moseley is on his ACL injury. And a really slow start to Isaiah Oliver's career. But I remember having you on the podcast, and we talked a lot about Isaiah Oliver. We were both really high on Isaiah Oliver. That's why he was my Shadow 49ers pick in the second round of 2018. That was the Dante Pettis pick, by the way. So I think score 1 for Peacock in that column. But he started out slow, and he's a big corner, 6'1", 200 pounds. He had those long 33.5-inch arms, I remember, and he was the prototype of the old, original Saleh traditional cover 3 defense where you want the super long corner. And so I thought he was a perfect fit. Turns out he went to Atlanta, who were running that with Gus Bradley at the time as well. So that was the style of corner they thought he was. But he didn't really take off early in his NFL career, Croc, playing outside corner. He kind of took off when he started playing a little bit more in the slot, even though he's not your 5'9" K1 Williams, right? He's a bigger slot, which is really interesting. And I wonder why that is. And I'm interested to watch more of Isaiah Oliver because that, a lot of times we get it right. Clelin Ferrell kind of saw what he was. And, we've talked before about how, Jerry Jeudy is a good one. I love Jerry Jeudy coming out, and he had these great feet and he could separate, but I didn't love him at the catch point. You see him in the NFL, he's getting all kinds of separation, but he's bad at the catch point. It was holding him back a little bit in his NFL career. A lot of times, it's not that surprising, and you see the things that you saw in college and you see those things that you saw in the scouting report show up in the NFL. And sometimes they fix those things that are the negatives, and sometimes the positives don't shine as much, or sometimes it's just magnifying everything that you saw in college. And that's kind of what it was with Clelin Ferrell. But the Isaiah Oliver scouting report kind of threw me for a loop. And so I'm wondering if they see a big slot corner, if they're going to try to use him outside, with a big corner. Anytime you have a corner over 200 pounds, you think, oh, maybe this guy could play safety. If you could play in the slot, it seems like you're 200 pounds in the slot, you should be able to play some safety. Or maybe that's what they think the role is he's going to do all three and just be a really versatile piece. To me, though, this is more replacing Jimmy Ward than replacing probably Emmanuel Moseley. Do you read it the same way with Isaiah Oliver?
I could see that somebody with some of that kind of versatility be able to play. I mean, you think about Jimmy Ward. He's played all over the defense for the 49ers, right? Played corner, played nickel, played corner again, played safety, went back to nickel, played corner again. I mean, just all the coaching changes. I'm not quite sure if Oliver is that guy. When you think of Jimmy Ward, and a lot of people, he was drafted to 49ers, they're like, oh, he's going to play nickel. And it's like, well, when you watch his college film at, I believe it was Northern Illinois, he was kind of a quarters safety who played a lot of coverage on slot receivers. So it kind of was right up his alley. Oliver has kind of been the opposite up until probably like this last year. So, how good was he with that? A lot of challenges for guys that are bigger like that with the, in the slot is their change of direction. It's typically not great, right? The taller you get, the longer you get, the more you kind of miss out on the change of direction and being able to match the movement skills of some of these smaller guys in the slot. But if they feel like, what, there's a lot of big slots in the NFL right now, I think we could utilize this guy here, then maybe that's what they're doing. But I see him potentially as an outside guy. And I think that's where the 49ers need a lot of the depth. Because if you think about the nickel, there is Samuel Womack. We know he can play there. There is Diamador Lenore. He played a lot outside. But we know starting off the season, where was he playing, right? After Womack kind of, I don't know, it was kind of, I guess, wet the bed. I thought he played well. But then next thing you know, he was benched.
You know what's odd is the Womack timeline is looking exactly like what the Diamador Lenore timeline was the year before.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we've seen the second year takeoff from some prospects. And I think Womack's a perfect example of a guy who could really take off here in year two and just run with that slot corner position, because it sounds like the 49ers want to keep I think everything that's gone on this offseason is a huge vote of confidence for Diamador Lenore as a starting cornerback across from Charvarius Ward. So to me, Isaiah Oliver is a depth piece that could back up multiple spots, but I think it's on Sam Womack to come in year two and go win that job at nickel. And so that's what I'm looking for. Similarly, I'm looking for Drake Jackson to go win that job at edge. Don't let Clelin Ferrell come in and take that from you, and at least be the guy on third downs on the outside, even if Ferrell's or maybe they're mixing up with Armstead on the outside and Kinlaw inside. So there's some versatility here when we're talking about the secondary and the defensive line. And a little bit more depth now with Oliver, but I'm still not exactly sure if I feel great about how it's shaping up. I'm good with the D-line right now. It's still a wait and see. We're going to have to see post-draft what the 49ers look like in the defensive secondary, because I think there's a chance that they could be worse than they were last year, because I think they're coming in with less depth. And last year with Ward and Mosley, with the other guys at depth, was a better place to start than the 49ers are starting now without Mosley and starting with the guys who were depth last year as the guys.
Right, because, you could maybe say, can Isaiah Oliver make a case to actually start? We're talking about him as a depth piece.
Yeah.
But could he come in and just be like, oh, man, we got a veteran who could play on the outside, has a versatility to play inside, and, hey, we're signing you. It's a 2-year deal. We actually want you to start over Diamador Lenore.
I wonder if that's the case. And I think we'll find out when we see what the dollars are for both Ferrell and Isaiah Oliver, because both those guys were starters. And both those guys were drafted with, top 50 picks, top 4 pick for Clelin Ferrell. I think Isaiah Oliver was a 50-something maybe overall in 2018. So they both played a lot. They're both still pretty young. Ferrell is going to turn 26, and Isaiah Oliver is about 26 and a half right now. So, I think the dollars will tell us what the 49ers think. But to me, I'm not ready to plug either one of those guys in as starters for the 49ers. We do have a question here that I want to address when it comes to the defensive backfield from a listener on Twitter. This is, if I can find it, from Chris on Twitter. He said, as the 49ers look at internal options at defensive back, Diamador Lenore, Sam Womack, I have a question. What happened to Ambry Thomas last year? He was playing a big role in 2021 playoffs. Is he no longer an option? Maybe a bad fit based on scheme? What's going on with Ambry Thomas, Croc?
I think that's the $1 million question. And with some of these guys, you just never know. I'd say this, at least from my experience in my short time in the NFL, the mental aspect of it is drastically different. I think, a lot of people that listen to the podcast, you and I, we just love football. We love it, right? But when you get into the NFL and you experience the business side of things, it kind of takes your love away from it a little bit. And it's just kind of like, hey, this is my job. But some guys go about it a different way, and understanding what goes into it, because it's drastically different than what you've done your entire life. Like your whole life, you've just enjoyed playing football. And then once you get a taste of this business side of things, where, man, I was a 3rd round draft pick. Okay, boom, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. And then you start kind of, coaches play mind games with you. Maybe they talk to you a certain way. And all of a sudden, you're just on the bench. You're not playing. And I'm not saying he's doing this, but at times you can kind of start going through the motions a little bit. And now all of a sudden you're not improving. And we've heard Kyle Shanahan say you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And when you look at Ambry Thomas, who had an opportunity late in 2021 season, and then you thought he was getting better, but then as soon as 2022 offseason started, it felt like, hey man, this guy is kind of far behind. Then camp starts and he's getting bombed on and it's not looking great. Then you're not really hearing all these great things about Ambry Thomas, a guy who you thought would really take that next step in his game. And we know how Kyle Shanahan, those guys, they're going to challenge you. And maybe he didn't answer the challenge extremely well. But a lot of times it's not so much that a guy can't play, man. It's that mental part of it, whether it's on the field with X's and O's and understanding all the different assignments that you're asked to do, or kind of the mental gymnastics that you have to play with these coaches and some of the things they do to try to either motivate you or weed you out.
Yeah, it's funny because we see it feels like Demo has all the like all the helium with the team right now. And he's going to be the guy at corner, but that's what we thought about Ambry Thomas last year. And before the Charvarius Ward, we're like, oh man, maybe let's go with Ambry Thomas as the starting cornerback, and they're not going to sign anybody at corner. So who knows? Maybe it's Sam Womack that shows up and he wins the job outside. We're talking about him in the slot. Maybe it's Isaiah Oliver. I don't know, because you got to come sharp. Every season's a new season. So this is going to be interesting how things do shake out here in the secondary, including Ambry Thomas. And, we were leaving Aaron Banks for dead, and he comes out and he played awesome at left guard after not being a factor at all as a rookie. So every season's a new season, and all these guys have opportunities, and I think there's going to be quite a competition. And by the way, Steve Wilkes, he's a former DBs coach too, so that's his specialty. So we'll see how he coaches these guys up in the secondary for the 49ers in 2023. Next, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, backup linebacker, was not tendered a restricted free agent contract, and the Niners lose maybe their most versatile offensive player. Yes, I said that. We're talking Christian McCaffrey, and we're talking Kyle Juszczyk, Deebo Samuel. There's another guy that played even more positions than those guys on the San Francisco 49ers offense in the Kyle Shanahan era, Daniel Brunskill. That's right. He is now a member of the Tennessee Titans. We'll get to that and more next. I do want to thank everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out a brand new podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. You remember the Draft Dudes? Yes. Listen to Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, also the hosts of Locked On Bills and Locked On Dolphins, respectively. From the Draft Network, those guys have done great stuff with the draft for so long. They got a new podcast here talking salary cap management, NFL draft, free agency, and more. So Locked On NFL Draft with the Draft Dudes. Find it everywhere, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm excited about that new show.
Good dudes. I love talking to them. They've been on this show. I've been on their shows, and they always bring the heat when it comes to the draft. And I just listened to the first episode of the new pod talking about free agency and breaking all of that down. So definitely a must listen here on the network. We got tons of great folks here on the network. It's an unbelievable amount of talent here. The 49ers losing some talent, Croc. Dan Brunskill, Aaron Donald's father, as he is sometimes known. I'm sad about this one. He's been the 49ers' sixth man on the offensive line, started a lot of games, really helped, I think, Spencer Burford along, and they were kind of, back and forth at right guard this year, but he's played center, he's played left guard, he's played right guard, he's played both tackle spots. He can play any 5 of the offensive line spots on the San Francisco 49ers. Again, it's a 2-year contract with the Tennessee Titans, so Rand Carthon coming hard at 49ers players, bringing in Azeez Al-Shaair and Daniel Brunskill, and I have a feeling Al-Shaair is going to definitely be a starter for the Titans at linebacker. I wonder if Daniel Brunskill might find a home as a starting player, and he didn't want to come back to the 49ers as a sixth man. He wanted to be that starter, and I have a feeling he's going to get that opportunity with the Tennessee Titans. It's just a question of which position he's going to play in Tennessee.
Yeah, you don't know. And again, there was a time where I thought, oh man, Joe Staley's retiring. Okay, it's cool. 49ers have Daniel Brunskill to go out there and play tackle, which he played tackle, and he played tackle extremely well when he played. Now, I say extremely well, but maybe it was just well for a guy who was a reserve player. But I thought he was solid there. I thought he was actually better at tackle than he was at guard. So that lets you know kind of how I feel about him. And obviously tackle is the more valuable position. But You need those type of guys. We talked about guys who just have a role, and his role was wherever you need me, I'm ready to go. I can play, and there's not this drastic drop off. I will always remember Colin Kaepernick's first start against the Chicago Bears. And a lot of people remember Colin Kaepernick and kind of, man, he came out and, man, he looked good. He's throwing the ball down the field. But what they forget is on the other side of the ball, Aldon Smith destroyed some tackle. I don't know who that tackle was. But all night long, just Alden was just destroying them, spin moves, throwing them around. I think he had 5 sacks in that game. And Daniel Brunskill was never that guy. Like, he was never the guy that you just had to say, you know what, this guy can't hold his own at all in this ball game. Again, not some great all-pro offensive lineman, but he was always solid. You could always count on him to come in and just do well. So it is unfortunate to lose a guy like that, especially when a lot of NFL players or teams are trying to have good offensive linemen. There's a shortage of it. And he was a guy who, if any of your starting 5 go out, or you got a guard, Spencer Burford, who, you know, he's like, okay, get him in. Okay, let's pull him back a little bit. Okay, Daniel Brunskill, go get some reps. Okay, let's take Brunskill out. Okay, Spencer Burford, go back in there. But however you want to utilize him, he was ready for that. And there wasn't this drastic drop-off to where it was like, man, this guy just can't play in the NFL. So I think that is between him and probably like Aziz. Like those would be some signings that would be kind of like, dang, kind of missed that guy.
Yeah, and kudos to Rand Carthon, because I think those are going to be really nice signings. I don't know what the money is for either one of those. They haven't been released yet, but I have a feeling those will be guys that are high-level contributors for a football team that they're not breaking the bank on either. So smart dude. Paid attention while he was scouting with the San Francisco 49ers as well. So good on Rand Carthon for getting things going in the right direction with the Tennessee Titans. Speaking of second-year players, there's some big opportunities in the offensive line. Obviously, Spencer Burford is either by himself now at right guard, maybe has a chance to kick out to right tackle and compete there. Looking at the 49ers restricted free agents, they did, instead of doing the free agent tender, they signed Colton McKivitz to a 2-year contract. So, you know, if you're penciling in players right now, it'd be Burford at right guard and Colton McKivitz probably at right tackle. But last year's 6th-round pick, Nick Zakelj, was getting some work at center. And, I mean, camp superstar Jason Poe, undrafted free agent. They stuck with him all year long. I like Jason Poe as a breakout player, too, in year 2. So I think it's going to be a big year for that 2022 draft class. When we're talking Drake Jackson needs to take a big step. Sam Womack has an opportunity to be the number 1 nickel, probably. You got Jason Poe, undrafted guy. You've got maybe he's the right guard and you kick Spencer Burford out. I would like to see Poe get some reps at center as well. I think he has a legit shot this year. He was on the practice squad last year to actually make the roster in 2023, and Nick Zakelj as well in the mix. So, and no doubt there's going to be some rookies battling with those guys, but a lot of second-year guys with some big opportunities this year.
I would say that I think a lot of times we kind of forget, right? Like, you know, off the top of the head, if you were to say, what are the 49ers' weaknesses? You might point to edge rusher. Man, they need an edge rusher. Well, it's like you did invest in the guy. 2nd-round pick, late 2nd round, but however you see it, and there's some talent there. There's some potential there. You got to kind of see it through, unless you're just really able to just improve on it, which I would say right now, at least through the draft, you probably won't be able to. Maybe if you go like, oh man, let's go get Jadeveon Clowney, who just got released from the Cleveland Browns, then okay, you just know more of what you're getting. But when you have some of these guys like Zakelj and others, kind of got to see them play to know if they can play and really give them that opportunity, and not just looking at reports of training camp. Oh man, it looked like this, or oh he had a bad day because he missed this block or whatever. Like, dude, they got to go through it. When you think about anything in life, right? Like everybody, you, myself, you go through ups and downs, and you have to be bad to get better. When I first joined this show, people couldn't stand me and wanted me off the show, right? Like, you remember that? You remember the comments, the reviews? There was a whole Reddit post of just get Eric Crocker out of there. And now it's like, hey man, people love the show. So like, you have to go through ups and downs. You got to figure it out. We had to build our, continuity and cohesiveness. And I think some of these young guys, they need that opportunity as well.
Man, I didn't know there was a whole Reddit post about that.
Oh, yeah, there was a whole Reddit post. Somebody tagged me in it.
You know what, Croc? You did ruin my 5.0 Apple Podcasts rating. It was unbelievable. I was like shocked. I was like, I still have a 5.0 rating with hundreds and hundreds of ratings. That is, does not happen. But you know what's funny is people would die if you left the podcast now, Croc. So you can't leave. Like you want anybody. People just hate change. That's what it is,
Right.
Yeah, I think we got better, and I think we make each other better as well because it says we're a good team here on Locked On 49ers.
We're a good team.
Actually, speaking of second-year guys,
we're like John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Marcelino McCrary-Ball. He's another second-year guy. Has a chance to make an impact. I loved what I saw. The two best undrafted free agents I thought this year for the 49ers. Jordan Mason, another running back. He was pretty good as well. But I think Jason Poe and Marcelino McCrary-Ball at linebacker. And with the 49ers not tendering a restricted free agent contract with Demetrius Flanagan-Foles,
that was surprising to me.
A little surprising. Yeah, he's been around for a while, and they spent the time developing him. And so you got Oren Burks, you got Marcelino McCrary-Ball, but I think that's a position the 49ers are going to hit in the draft. And I think to end the week here, Croc, we should probably sort of like reshuffle things and look at what the new updated team needs are for the 49ers heading in through the rest of free agency in the draft, because I think linebacker definitely jumps up in those rankings. And I think it's a really good place to draft linebackers where the 49ers have a bunch of picks this year. But Marcelino McCrary-Ball, I think I'd probably pencil him in a linebacker 4 at this point. You got Curtis Robinson's been a special teams guy, but he wasn't really even on the active roster at the end of the year either. So there's going to be some competition there at linebacker after obviously Fred Warner, who just got his contract restructured, by the way. It was announced to make a little space for the 49ers. I think that's just so they can operate and sign their draft picks. I don't think that's because any more big moves are coming. But who knows? Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch do have a way of surprising us. So we'll see if there's any more surprises in free agency, any big trades happening with the San Francisco 49ers. If there are, of course, Croc and I will be with you every day here and have you covered with it. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Make sure you check out the new Locked On Scouting podcast with the Draft Dudes. Make sure you check out my other pod on the network with former NFL scout Matt Williamson, the Peacock and Williamson NFL, covering the entire league every single day. And Croc and I will be back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.